My body is the frame wherein 'tis held, and perspective it is the painter's art. For through the painter must you see his skill to find where your true image pictured lies.
That is, well, quite the juxtaposition to kick things off.
Right, you're listening to that and probably wondering if you accidentally clicked on a Renaissance literature deep dive or something.
It definitely sounds like it.
But no, that is William Shakespeare, Sonnet 24. And we aren't here to dissect Elizabethan poetry.
No, fakely not.
We are here because that exact quote, which is, 400 years old, is sitting on page 1 of a highly technical modern medical imaging textbook.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's the opening to an incredibly dense chapter on digital radiography.
It feels really jarring at first glance. I mean, you have this massive, intimidating textbook filled with physics and algorithms and radiation safety protocols, and the author chooses to lead with a poem about painters and perspective.
Yeah.
But when you truly start to peel back the layers of what digital radiography is actually doing inside a modern hospital, it is a profoundly accurate, almost eerie metaphor.
Okay, let's pull on that thread then. How does a 16th century poet connect to the machine that, tells you if your arm is broken?
Well, think about the fundamental act of a painter. A painter doesn't literally capture reality.
Right.
They don't trap a physical object on a canvas. They use perspective, they use shading, they use specialized techniques to create a representation.
Like an illusion? Kinda.
Exactly. They construct an image that reveals a specific truth to the viewer. And modern digital radiography does the exact same thing, just, replacing oil paints with mathematics and digital processing.
Wait, so the idea that an X-ray is just a photograph of your bones, that's just a lie.
It's a massive oversimplification, yeah. The true image hidden within the human body isn't just snapped like a Polaroid.
Okay.
It doesn't physically exist as a picture until it is mathematically constructed, processed, and forcibly revealed through an incredibly complex digital pipeline. Wow. The computer is the painter. It uses algorithms to paint the picture of your anatomy.
That is a wild paradigm shift, and honestly, it perfectly sets up our mission for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
We are looking at a stack of sources centering around RAD122, which is the foundational study of medical imaging.
Right.
So whether you are a radiography student staring down a massive, just intimidating chapter review sheet, or you are just someone utterly fascinated by the invisible math keeping us alive in a hospital, we are going to decode this entire digital pipeline.
It's going to be a journey.
Definitely. We're taking terms like matrix, bit depth, and DQE and translating them from dense textbook jargon into the actual mechanisms of how they work. We aren't just defining things. We are going to figure out the why and the how.
Yeah, we are essentially going to follow an X-ray photon from the moment it leaves the tube and interacts with the patient, all the way to the moment a radiologist is looking at a high-contrast image on a medical monitor.
Making a life-saving diagnosis. And to understand how the computer paints this digital picture, we have to start with the physical canvas, right?
Right, the raw materials.
Traditional radiography, the stuff from 50 years ago, used physical film. You exposed it, you took it to a dark room, soaked it in chemicals. Pure analog chemistry.
Right, very messy.
But our sources map out the transition to the digital world, stating that modern systems replace that film with a reusable detector.
Yes.
And they divide these modern systems into two distinct physical types. There is computed radiography, or CR, and digital radiography, or DR.
And understanding the physical difference between CR and DR is crucial because it dictates how the entire digital pipeline actually begins.
Okay, let's start with computed radiography, or CR.
So the text gives us a very specific, somewhat intimidating term for the hardware used here.
Yeah.
It utilizes a photostimulable storage phosphor imaging plate.
Oh boy, photostimulable storage phosphor.
It's a mouthful.
Okay, let's break that down, because I refuse to just memorize a phrase without knowing what it actually means.
Good strategy.
So storage phosphor, that sounds like a material that absorbs energy and holds onto it, right?
Exactly.
And photostimulable, well, photo is light, so it reacts when you shine a light on it.
That is a perfect deduction. So in a CR system, the technologist uses a cassette that looks very much like the old analog film cassettes. It's a flat, rectangular board.
Right?
But inside, instead of chemical film, there is this phosphor plate. When the X-ray photons pass through the patient and strike this plate, they don't leave a visible mark.
No picture at all.
Nope. Instead, the incredible energy of those X-rays excites the electrons within the phosphor crystals.
Like knocking them out of their normal orbit.
Precisely. The energy knocks these electrons into a higher energy state, and the physical structure of the phosphor actually traps them up there.
Oh, wow.
They get stuck in what's called a miscogestable state. So the image of the patient is now secretly stored as a pattern of millions of trapped, highly energized electrons across this plate.
And that's your latent image.
That is the latent image, yes.
But the technologist still just has this plastic cassette in their hand. There's no screen on it. How does that pattern of trapped electrons actually get into the computer?
Well, this is where the photostimulable part comes in.
Yeah.
The technologist physically carries that cassette over to a specialized reader machine and slides it in.
Okay.
Inside the reader, a laser beam, a very specific wavelength of light, sweeps back and forth across the plate.
The photostimulation.
Right. When that laser light hits the trapped electrons, it gives them just enough energy to escape their trap and fall back down to their normal resting state.
And when things fall from a high energy state to a low energy state, they have to release the difference. So they release energy.
Exactly. They release that stored X-ray energy in the form of visible blue light.
Wow. So it actually glows.
It literally glows. As the laser scans the plate glows in the exact pattern of the X-ray exposure. The reader captures that glowing light, measures its intensity, and that is what begins the digital process.
That is deeply cool. It's like a glow-in-the-dark star on a ceiling, but incredibly precise and requiring a laser to activate.
It's a great analogy.
But, yeah, I mean, it also sounds a bit clunky. You still have to physically walk a cassette across the room to a reader.
It is a bit of a workflow bottleneck, yes.
Which leads us to the second type, right? Digital radiography, or DR. The text notes that DR involves direct or indirect conversion methods, but the key difference seems to be the workflow itself.
Yes. DR is what we typically think of when we say modern instantaneous digital imaging. In a DR system, the detector is built directly into the X-ray table or the wall stand.
So no carrying cassettes around?
No cassettes. The moment the X-ray photons strike the detector, the conversion happens entirely within the circuitry of the board itself, and the image is instantaneously transmitted down a wire to the computer monitor.
It skips the whole laser scanning middleman. It just converts the X-ray directly into an electrical signal.
Yes, either directly into an electrical charge or indirectly by turning the X-rays into light first and then immediately into a charge.
But from the technologist's perspective, they push the button and 2 seconds later, the image is on the screen.
Boom, it's there.
Okay, so whether we are using the elaborate trapped electron laser dance of CR or the instantaneous circuitry of DR, both systems end up with the exact same problem.
And what's that?
They have captured physical, continuous energy, an analog signal.
Right.
But a computer doesn't understand physical energy. It doesn't know what bright light or strong voltage actually is.
It only speaks one language.
Binary, ones and zeros, discrete numerical values.
Which brings us to a massive component in our sources, the ADC, or analog to digital converter.
The bridge.
Exactly, the bridge. The text states that a digital image must be converted into numerical values for transmission and processing.
And I really want to spend some time here because the mechanics of how an ADC works are fundamental to everything that follows.
They really are.
The sources ask us to identify the steps taking place within the ADC, specifically highlighting a term called quantification.
Okay, let's build up to that. What is the ADC actually facing when it receives an analog signal?
Right.
Imagine an analog signal as a perfectly smooth, continuous ramp.
Okay, a ramp.
If you drop a ball at the top, it rolls down without ever hitting a bump. It represents an infinite number of possible values. The X-ray energy coming out of the patient is like that. It's a continuous wave of varying intensities.
But a computer can't store an infinite continuous wave. It has limited memory.
Right.
It needs distinct steps.
Exactly. The computer needs a staircase, not a ramp. The ADC's job is to build that staircase.
Okay, how does it do that?
The first thing it does, though our summary text sort of implies it rather than explicitly defining it, is sampling.
Sampling.
The ADC looks at that continuous wave of energy and takes specific microscopic measurements at regular intervals. It samples the voltage at point A, point B, point C, and so on.
Okay, so it's measuring the height of the ramp at specific intervals.
Yes. But just measuring it isn't enough. It has to assign a rigid, concrete number to that measurement. And that is the crucial step highlighted in our key terms. Quantification.
Quantification, to assign a quantity.
Right. Let's say the ADC samples a spot on the detector and that measures a voltage of like 4.123897 volts.
Okay.
The computer can't deal with that level of infinite analog precision. So during quantification, the ADC rounds that measurement to the nearest available step on our digital staircase.
Oh, I see.
It might say, okay, that value is closest to step number 45. I am officially quantifying this piece of energy as the integer 45.
Okay, so if the next spot on the detector is slightly darker and measures, say, 4.12390 volts, it might also get quantified as 45 because they both land on the same step of the staircase.
Exactly. Quantification inherently involves a tiny bit of rounding, tiny loss of that infinite analog perfection.
Right, you're rounding off the decimals.
But in return, it gives you a clean, discrete integer that a computer processor can actually manipulate. You are taking the messy reality of physical energy and forcing it into a neat numerical box.
Okay, and now we have millions of these quantified numbers, just a massive list of integers.
It's a very long list.
But a list of numbers is not an image. I mean, if I open a spreadsheet with 4 million numbers in it, I'm not going to see a picture of a femur.
Definitely not. The computer has to organize them.
And that leads us to the physical architecture of the image. The matrix, pixels, and voxels.
The digital canvas.
Right. Our sources define the matrix as a series of boxes laid out in rows and columns that gives form to the image. It is quite literally that giant blank spreadsheet.
And the computer takes all those quantified numbers from the ADC and drops each one into a very specific box in this grid.
And those individual boxes, those single two-dimensional squares within the grid, are the pixels.
Picture elements.
Yeah, we throw the word pixel around every day. We talk about the megapixels on our phone cameras or, dead pixels on a TV screen. Yeah. But in medical imaging, we are introduced to a three-dimensional counterpart. The sources specifically contrast a pixel with a voxel. What is the physical reality of a voxel?
Well, voxel stands for volume element. To understand it, you have to think about what an X-ray actually is.
Okay.
When you take a photograph of a person, you are only capturing the light bouncing off the surface of their skin. It is purely a surface map.
Right.
But an X-ray photon passes through the body.
Right. It travels from the front of the chest, through the skin, the muscle, the ribs, the lung tissue, the heart, the back ribs, and out the skin on the back.
Exactly. That is a three-dimensional column of tissue. It has depth.
Right.
But when that X-ray photon finally hits the detector on the other side, all of the information about that entire 3D column of tissue is compressed and smashed flat into a single two-dimensional square.
The pixel.
The pixel, exactly.
It's like taking a fully loaded sandwich and squishing it down in a panini press until it's completely flat. You lose the depth, but all the ingredients are technically still in there, just overlapping.
That's a great way to visualize it. The pixel is the flat 2D square on the radiologist's monitor. The voxel is the actual physical 3D rectangular tube of human tissue inside the patient that the pixel represents.
Oh, wow.
So in standard radiography, the image is a 2D matrix of pixels, but every pixel is secretly holding the compressed data of a 3D voxel.
That makes the stakes of this so much higher. You aren't just looking at a flat grid, you are looking at compressed anatomy.
Exactly.
Which makes the size of this grid incredibly important. And this brings us to a really fascinating logic puzzle presented in the source material regarding spatial resolution.
Ah, yes. The relationship between the matrix, the pixel, and the field of view.
Right, so the question poses a scenario. Imagine you have a small matrix and a large matrix, but they both have the exact same field of view, or FOV.
Okay.
Which one gives you better spatial resolution and why?
Let's work through this. First, we need to lock down what the field of view actually means in a physical sense.
Okay, what is it?
The field of view is simply the physical real estate of the anatomy you are exposing.
The size of the canvas.
Exactly. Let's say you are taking an X-ray of an ankle. You might cone your X-ray beam down to an 8-inch by 10-inch rectangle over the patient's ankle.
Right.
That 8 by 10-inch physical area is your FOV. In this scenario, that physical border is locked. It cannot change.
Okay, the canvas is absolutely locked at 8 by 10 inches. Now, the scenario asks us to compare a small matrix against a large matrix within that locked space.
Right.
A matrix is just the grid of boxes. So a small matrix might be, let's say, 100 boxes across by 100 boxes down.
And a large matrix might be 2,000 boxes across by 2,000 boxes down.
If I have to physically draw 100 boxes inside an 8 by 10 inch rectangle, I can make those boxes pretty big.
Yes.
But if you tell me I have to draw 4 million boxes, 2,000 by 2,000, inside that exact same 8 by 10 inch rectangle, the only physically possible way to achieve that is to shrink the boxes.
Right. The pixels have to become microscopic.
Okay.
Because the physical space is locked, an increase in matrix size mandates a decrease in pixel size. The pixels are forced to shrink to fit the grid.
And how does that relate to spatial resolution?
Well, spatial resolution is the measure of the structural sharpness of an image. It's the ability of the system to accurately map the incredibly fine, intricate details of human anatomy.
Like a tiny fracture.
Think of a tiny hairline fracture in a bone. It might be thinner than a piece of hair.
Right, so if my pixels are huge, like in our 100 by 100 matrix, one single pixel might cover a massive chunk of that bone.
Exactly.
And because a single pixel can only display one solid, uniform shade of gray, that entire area just gets averaged out. The tiny fracture disappears into a big gray block.
It's like playing an 8-bit video game from the 1980s. Everything is blocky and jagged.
Yeah, totally.
That jagged, blocky effect is called aliasing, and it is terrible for medical diagnosis.
Oh, I can imagine.
But if you use that massive 2000 by 2000 matrix, the pixels are so incredibly small that they can individually map the bone, then the tiny dark crack of the fracture, and then the bone on the other side.
Because they're small enough to capture the chain.
Exactly. The smaller the pixel, the sharper the edge.
So, to synthesize this for anyone trying to conceptually master this relationship, an increased matrix size within the same FOV inherently forces the pixel size to go down.
Yeah.
And when pixel size goes down, spatial resolution goes up, allowing the doctor to see incredibly fine, sharp details.
It is an inverse relationship that forms the backbone of digital image quality.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
If smaller pixels equal better resolution, why don't we just make the matrix infinitely large? Why not have a 100,000 by 100,000 matrix? Just make the pixels the size of atoms. Is there a catch?
There is always a catch in physics.
I knew it.
You run into hardware limitations and data management issues. An infinitely large matrix means an astronomically massive file size. You wouldn't be able to store the images or send them across the hospital network without crashing the servers.
Oh, right. Network speeds.
More importantly, you run into physical detector limits. The electronic components that make up a single pixel on the detector board can only be manufactured so small before they stop functioning efficiently, or they start bleeding electrical signal into their neighbors.
Ah, so they interfere with each other.
Right. So engineers have to find the sweet spot. Small enough pixels for diagnostic clarity, but large enough to be functional and manageable.
That makes perfect sense. It's a balancing act.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established our matrix grid, and we've shrunk our pixels down to get maximum sharpness. But what actually goes inside those pixels? I mentioned earlier that a pixel can only display one uniform shade at a time.
Right.
This brings us to another critical concept that our sources heavily emphasize: bit depth.
Grayscale bit depth. This is where we define the painter's palette.
The sources state that bit depth determines the number of possible shades of gray that a single pixel can display, ranging from pure white all the way to total black. But how does that actually work mathematically? We talked about the computer-speaking binary ones and zeros, bits and bytes.
Right. A bit is the smallest possible unit of digital data. It is a single switch that is either off, which is a 0, or on, which is a 1.
Okay.
Let's imagine a terrible digital X-ray system that only has a bit depth of 1. That means each pixel only has one single bit of memory assigned to it. It can only be a 0 or a 1.
So the pixel could be pure white or pure black, no gray at all.
Exactly. It would look like a high-contrast stencil or a silhouette. You would see the stark outline of the bones, but absolutely zero detail within the bone marrow, and the soft tissue would completely vanish.
That would be totally useless for medicine.
Completely useless. So we need more bits per pixel.
Okay.
And the way computer memory works, the number of possible shades is calculated as an exponent of 2. So if a system has an 8-bit depth, that means it can display 2 to the power of 8 shades.
2 times 2 times 2. 8 times. That's 256. So an 8-bit image gives you 256 different shades of gray.
Right.
That sounds like a lot.
It is for standard computer graphics. A lot of the black and white photos you see on the internet are 8-bit.
Okay.
But modern digital radiography systems are much more powerful. Many operate at a 12-bit depth, which is 2 to the 12th power, or 4,096 shades.
Wow.
Some high-end systems are 14-bit, which mathematically comes out to 16,384 distinct shades of gray between pure white and pure black.
16,384 shades of gray. Okay, this raises a massive red flag for me.
Also,
Well, it directly ties into one of the core questions in our source material. Is it better to have a small or large bit depth, and why?
right.
Let me play devil's advocate here. I have read that the human eye, under ideal viewing conditions in a dark room, can only distinguish somewhere around 30 to maybe 50 different shades of gray.
That is correct. Human visual physiology is surprisingly limited in that regard.
So if my highly trained radiologist can only physically see 50 shades of gray, Why on earth are we engineering multi-million-dollar medical equipment to capture 16,000 shades?
That is the big question.
Isn't capturing 15,950 shades that no human will ever see just a colossal waste of computing power and storage?
It is a brilliant question, and it's the exact trap that a lot of people fall into when studying this.
Yeah.
If you only think of the X-ray as a final static picture hanging on a wall, then yes, it's wasted data.
Right.
But the answer to the source question is unequivocally, it is better to have a very large bit depth.
Why? If I literally can't see it.
Because of what the computer's about to do to the image,
Yeah.
we have to remember the painter's metaphor.
Mm.
We are about to enter the processing phase where the computer takes this raw data and starts mathematically manipulating it to highlight specific diseases.
Okay.
The computer needs what we call algorithmic headroom.
Algorithmic headroom. Expand on that.
Let's say you only capture 256 shades of gray. That's your entire pool of data. Now, a radiologist says, I really need to see the subtle differences in this tiny pocket of lung tissue. The computer tries to stretch the contrast in that specific area to make it more visible. But because it only has a small pool of raw data, stretching it causes the image to tear.
Tear. Like a physical photo.
Mathematically tear.
Tear.
The numerical gaps between the shades become too wide. Instead of a smooth gradient of lung tissue, you get harsh, artificial bands of gray. The image degrades because you stretch the data too thin.
It's like taking a low-resolution thumbnail photo from a website and trying to blow it up to fit a billboard. It just becomes a blurry, pixelated mess because the underlying data just isn't there to support the stretch.
Exactly. That's it exactly. But if the computer has 16,000 shades of gray to play with, it has an incredibly deep, rich reservoir of raw data.
Oh, I get it now.
Even though you can't see all 16,000 shades at once, when the computer runs its algorithms to stretch, compress, and enhance the image, it has enough hidden data points to calculate the perfect, smooth visual gradient.
The image won't degrade when manipulated.
Exactly. So a larger bit depth is vastly superior because it provides the immense pool of subtle anatomical data required for advanced digital processing.
That makes total sense. We aren't capturing 16,000 shades for the human eye. We are capturing them for the computer's brain.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's take a breath and look at where we are in the digital pipeline.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. We have taken the physical X-ray energy. The ADC has sampled and quantified it into discrete numbers. Those numbers have been dropped into a high-resolution matrix made of microscopic pixels.
Right.
And because of our massive bit depth, every single one of those millions of pixels holds a highly precise, nuanced value between 0 and 16,000.
We have successfully captured the raw data.
But if we just slapped that raw, unprocessed data onto a doctor's monitor right now, what would they actually see?
They would see a disaster. It would likely look like a chaotic, incredibly low-contrast gray fog. It wouldn't look anything like a diagnostic X-ray.
And that profound failure of raw data is what pushes us into the most conceptually difficult, yet most fascinating part of our deep dive. We are moving from data capture to data processing.
The painter's brain.
Yes. The computer must now intervene to make this chaos readable. The source material asks a very direct question. What is the purpose of image processing operations in digital radiography systems?
The sources give us a definitive mission statement for this phase. The purpose is primarily intended to change the input values of the pixels to improve the diagnostic quality of the output image.
Change the input values. I want to linger on that phrase for a second because it goes back to our Shakespeare quote.
It does.
A computer is literally taking the raw physical truth of the patient's exposure, the exact numbers captured by the ADC, and intentionally deleting them, altering them, and replacing them with new numbers.
Yes. It is a mathematical forgery designed to save lives.
A forgery.
Really, it is. If the raw value of a pixel is 4,000, but the algorithm decides that making that pixel 6,500 will make a tumor more visible, it changes the number. It fundamentally alters reality to reveal a clearer diagnostic truth.
That's incredible. And the primary way it does this, the absolute cornerstone of grayscale processing, is something called histogram analysis.
Yes.
The source material asks us to explain what happens during this analysis and what data is collected. Now, histogram sounds like a terrifying statistics term, but let's ground it. What is it, really?
Imagine our giant matrix, again, filled with millions of pixels, each holding a specific number representing a shade of gray. The computer needs to understand what it's looking at.
Okay.
So it essentially takes a massive inventory. It scans the entire matrix
Yeah.
and counts. It says, okay, how many pixels in this entire image have a value of exactly 1? How many have a value of exactly 2? How many have a value of 10,000?
It's sorting the raw data into piles.
Exactly. And then it plots those piles onto a graph, a bar graph specifically.
Mhm.
That graph is the histogram. The horizontal axis, the x-axis, represents the continuous spectrum of pixel values, from the lowest signal intensity, which is pure white on the left, to the highest signal intensity, which is pitch black on the right.
Let me stop you there because the sources ask us to explicitly define what is on the right versus the left side of the histogram. Let's make sure we have the physics right. Why is the left side white and the right side black?
It comes down to how the detector measures signal. Dense objects in the human body, like solid bone or lead markers, absorb almost all the X-rays. They stop the radiation.
Right, the X-rays don't get through.
Therefore, the detector behind the bone receives very little energy. It is a low signal intensity. In radiography, areas of low signal are displayed as white or light gray. So the left side of the histogram, the low numbers, represents the white, bony anatomy.
Okay, and on the flip side, things like air in the lungs or just the empty space around the patient's arm absorb 0 X-rays. The radiation blasts straight through at full power and slams into the detector. That's a massive high signal intensity. And in imaging, high signal is displayed as black. So the right side of the histogram represents the black radiolucent areas.
Exactly. So the x-axis is our shade of gray. The vertical y-axis simply represents the number of pixels.
Oh, I see.
If you have a huge spike on the left side of the graph, it means your image has a massive amount of dense white bone. If you have a huge spike on the right, it means you have a lot of black air or raw radiation.
So the histogram isn't just a chart. It's a topographical mountain range representing the patient's anatomy.
Yes.
A chest X-ray will have a totally different shape, a different mountain range than a hand X-ray.
That is exactly how the computer thinks about it. And this brings us to what actually happens during the analysis. The sources state that the system uses this generated histogram to find the useful signal by locating the minimum and maximum signal within the anatomical regions of interest.
Find the useful signal. That implies that a large portion of the data we just spent all this time capturing is actually useless garbage.
It absolutely is.
Really?
Think about taking an X-ray of an ankle. The ankle is sitting in the middle of a large rectangular detector. A massive amount of the X-ray beam completely misses the ankle and hits the blank borders of the detector.
Just the empty air on the leg.
Right. That raw, unattenuated radiation creates a huge spike of black pixels on the far right of the histogram. But that spike contains 0 information about the patient's bones. It's useless.
And there might be a spike on the far left from a lead marker, which is also useless for diagnosing a fracture.
Exactly. The computer's histogram analysis algorithm looks at the shape of the mountain range and mathematically determines the tails of the graph.
The tails.
It says, this massive spike of black over here is just raw beam. I'm going to ignore it. This spike of white over here is a lead marker. Ignore the actual nuanced humps in the middle. That's the soft tissue and bone of the ankle. It locates the minimum useful value and the maximum useful value, essentially putting digital brackets around the true anatomy.
It's intelligently cropping the data set so it only processes the human being, not the blank space around them. That is brilliant.
It is the critical first step. But the raw data still has a problem. What happens if the technologists messed up? What if they used twice as much radiation as they should have?
Well, if they used too much radiation, the entire mountain range would be shifted over to the right. The whole image would be flooded with too much signal, making everything way too dark.
And this introduces one of the most powerful and, as we'll discuss later, most dangerous tools in digital radiography: rescaling.
Rescaling.
The source questions ask us simply, what does rescaling do?
Let me try an analogy here.
Go for it.
I like to bake. If I put a heavy glass bowl on a digital kitchen scale, the scale reads 500 grams. But I don't care about the bowl, I only care about the flour I'm about to pour in. So I hit the tare button. The scale forcibly resets the 500-gram weight back to 0. It shifts the entire baseline of the math so that whatever I pour in next is measured correctly, regardless of the bowl's weight. Is rescaling kind of like a digital tare button for the X-ray?
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Okay.
Yes. Rescaling is the computer's way of forcibly fixing exposure errors.
Okay.
The computer knows what a perfect ankle histogram should look like. It has a reference model. If the technologist uses too much radiation, the captured histogram is shifted way too far to the dark side.
Right.
During rescaling, the computer literally grabs that entire mountain range of data and slides it back down the axis until it lines with the perfect reference model.
It shifts the baseline. It changes the numerical values of the pixels to force the overall brightness of the image to look perfect, even if the raw physical data was way off.
Exactly. It maps the acquired data values to a preset range of expected values. This means that whether you use slightly too little radiation or way too much radiation, rescaling will automatically fix the brightness before it ever hits the monitor.
The computer just covers up the human error.
Pretty much.
I can see why you hinted that this could be dangerous, but let's put a pin in the safety aspect for now.
Good idea.
We have found the useful signal, and we have rescaled the data so the overall brightness is in the correct ballpark. But what about the contrast? How does the computer know exactly how punchy or flat the image should look? Because an ankle needs to look vastly different than a lung.
Sure.
This brings us to the LUT. The sources ask, what does the lookup table, or LUT, do?
If rescaling fixes the brightness, the LUT fixes the contrast. LUT stands for lookup table. The text explains that the LUT is applied to the data that has the standard contrast for that exam to give the desired image contrast for display.
Okay, walk me through the math of a lookup table. How does it physically change the contrast?
Think of the LUT as a massive two-column spreadsheet hidden inside the computer's memo.
Spreadsheet.
The left column is the input value, which is the raw pixel number that survived rescaling. The right column is the output value, which is the brand new number the computer is going to assign to that pixel.
So the computer literally looks up the old number, finds it in the left column, reads across to the right column, and swaps it out for the new number.
Exactly. And the magic is in how those output numbers are chosen. The relationship between the input and output isn't a straight line. It's typically a curve, often shaped like an S.
An S-curve.
Right. Let's say we are looking at a hand. We want high contrast. We want the bones to look starkly white against dark, soft tissue.
Yeah.
The hand LUT is mathematically designed to take the subtle, mid-range gray values and aggressively push them outward. It takes the lighter grays and forces them to become pure white. It takes the darker grays and forces them to become pitch black.
It stretches the data apart?
Yes.
Yeah.
But if we are X-raying a chest, we don't want stark black and white. Well, if the lungs were pure black and the ribs were pure white, we couldn't see the subtle gray blood vessels or a tiny gray pneumonia spot.
Oh, right, you'd lose all the midtones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the computer applies a completely different mathematical table, the chest LUT. This table does the opposite. It takes extreme values and compresses them inward, maintaining a massive, smooth gradient of hundreds of subtle mid-tone grays.
So the computer is actively choosing a specific customized filter based on the anatomy. The radiologist selects chest on the machine, and the computer pulls the specific algorithm to paint a low-contrast picture. If they select hand, it pulls a different algorithm to paint a high-contrast picture.
That is the essence of global grayscale processing.
Global meaning the whole image at once.
Yes. The ADC captures the numbers, the histogram finds the anatomy, rescaling fixes the overall exposure, and the LUT applies the perfect, clinically proven contrast curve.
Okay, that covers the global processing, adjusting the entire image at once. But sometimes applying a blanket contrast curve isn't enough. Sometimes you need to hyper-focus on specific textures or boundaries. And this transitions us into what the sources call local processing or spatial frequency filtering.
This section of the source material reads like a riddle.
It really does.
Yeah.
It asks us for the other names for high-pass and low-pass filtering and expects us to explain the physics of what happens during them, relying heavily on the key terms list.
Right.
The key terms list gives us the words high-pass filtering, low-pass filtering, and kernel. Let's start with the tool itself. What is a kernel in the context of image processing?
A kernel is the mathematical engine of local processing. Unlike the LUT, which changes every pixel based solely on its own value, a kernel changes a pixel based on its neighbors.
Its neighbors.
Yeah. A kernel is a small matrix of numbers, usually a 3x3 or 5x5 grid.
A tiny grid.
Yes. The computer takes this tiny 3x3 kernel and physically slides it over the massive image matrix, pixel by pixel, row by row. At every single stop, it looks at the center pixel, and then it looks at the 8 pixels immediately surrounding it. It runs a mathematical equation called convolution that blends all those neighborhood values together to calculate a brand new, highly customized value for that single center pixel.
It's judging a pixel by the company it keeps. It looks at the neighborhood to decide what the house should look like.
That's exactly it. And by changing the specific numbers inside that sliding 3x3 kernel, you can force the image to do very different things.
Which brings us to the two types of filters, high pass and low pass.
Right. To understand them, we have to understand what frequency means in a static image.
Yeah, because when we think of frequency, we usually think of sound waves, like high pitch versus low pitch. How does an image have a frequency?
It's about how rapidly the visual information changes. If I am looking at an X-ray of a perfectly smooth, uniform liver, all the pixels are almost the exact same shade of dark gray. As my eye moves across the liver, the values change very, very slowly.
Yes. A slow, smooth change in pixel values over distance is defined as a low-frequency area.
But what if I look at the edge of a bone? Moving across the image, you have dark, soft tissue, and then suddenly, bam, bright white bone.
The pixel values jump from 200 to 14,000 across a microscopic distance.
A rapid, drastic change in pixel values over a short distance is a high-frequency area. Edges, borders, and sharp details are high frequency.
Okay, armed with that logic, let's tackle the source questions. What is another name for high-pass filtering? Explain what happens. Let me deduce this.
Let's hear it.
A high-pass filter must mathematically allow the high frequencies to pass through the kernel while actively suppressing or muting the low frequencies.
Correct. It ignores the smooth areas and attacks the areas of rapid change.
If it turns up the volume on the areas of rapid change, the edges of the bones, and turns down the volume on the smooth muscle, the image is going to look incredibly sharp. The borders will pop. So the other name for high-pass filtering must be edge enhancement.
You nailed it. Edge enhancement. During this process, the kernel algorithm artificially increases the contrast right at the microscopic boundaries between different tissues. It literally brightens the light side of the edge and darkens the dark side of the edge.
Oh.
It makes the bones look like they were drawn with a fine point Sharpie.
Yeah.
It is phenomenally useful for finding tiny microcalcifications in mammography or subtle hairline fractures in orthopedics.
But there has to be a downside. If it turns up the volume on all high-frequency sharp changes, wouldn't it also turn up the volume on digital noise? Random static is technically high-frequency change.
It absolutely does. Edge enhancement makes noise look much worse. You cannot use it heavily on an image that is already grainy.
Okay, which leads us to the inverse. What is the other name for low-pass filtering, and what happens?
Following the inverse logic.
Low-pass filtering allows the smooth, low frequencies to pass through while actively crushing and suppressing the high frequencies, meaning the sharp edges and the noise. If you erase the sharp edges and blur everything slightly together, you are softening the image. So the other name must be smoothing.
Yes, smoothing. The kernel acts as a localized averaging tool. It takes that sharp, jagged jump between bone and tissue and mathematically averages the values together, creating a softer, more gradual transition.
But why would a doctor ever want to blur your image? Isn't sharpness the whole point?
Not always. If a radiologist is trying to evaluate the subtle texture of the liver or the kidneys, stark white bone edges can actually be a huge distraction. It's too harsh on the eyes.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Furthermore, if the image has a lot of that electronic noise we just mentioned, low-pass filtering smooths right over it. It sacrifices a tiny bit of edge sharpness to provide a beautiful, clean, noise-free view of the overall soft tissue structures.
It's like applying a slight blur filter on a portrait photograph to hide skin blemishes. You lose a bit of eyelash sharpness, but the skin looks perfectly smooth. High pass enhances the edges, low pass smooths the overall structure.
That covers the incredibly complex journey of the computer's automatic processing. We've captured, histogrammed, rescaled, LUT adjusted, and frequency filtered the data. The image is finally sent across the hospital network to the radiologist's reading room.
But the manipulation isn't over, because now human hands get back on the controls.
Right.
We are moving into the doctor's domain, windowing. The text mentions that windowing changes the contrast and brightness of the image on the monitor, and it sets up a very specific fill-in-the-blank logic test for us regarding window width and window level. Let's separate these two distinct tools.
Let's start with window level. We established earlier that the raw data contains thousands of shades of gray, up to 16,000.
Right, our massive bit depth.
But standard computer monitors can only display a few hundred shades at a time, and the human eye can only see about 50.
Yeah.
The window level is a tool that allows the doctor to pick which specific chunk of that massive data set they want to look at right now.
It's like having an encyclopedic dictionary, but you can only open it to one page at a time. The window level tells you which page to open.
Yes. Technically, window level sets the midpoint of the range of densities visible on the monitor.
Okay.
If the radiologist moves the window level up, they are centering their view on the higher, darker pixel values. The overall image on the screen gets darker. If they move the window level down, they sit around the lower, lighter values, and the image gets brighter.
So window level is essentially the brightness dial.
Conceptually, yes, but window width is far more complex, and it dictates the contrast.
Okay, how so?
Window width determines the total range of gray shades that will be displayed around that midpoint. Are we going to look at a tight cluster of 100 shades or a massive spread of 4,000 shades?
And this leads directly into the core source question, which is a logic puzzle. A narrow width will have blank shades of gray, resulting in an image with blank contrast. Let's work it out. If I choose a narrow window width, I am mathematically restricting the range. I am forcing the monitor to display a very small slice of the available data. Therefore, a narrow width will have fewer shades of gray.
Correct. You might only be displaying 50 total shades between pure black and pure white.
And if an image only has 50 shades to transition from total black to stark white, the jump between each shade is massive. There is no smooth gradient. It's just harsh blacks, harsh whites, and a few jagged grays in between. That is the definition of high contrast.
So the first completed sentence is, a narrow width will have fewer shades of gray, resulting in an image with high contrast.
Got it.
Radiologists use this constantly. If they're looking at a chest x-ray and want to see if a rig is cracked, they don't care about the lung tissue. They narrow the window width drastically. The soft tissue disappears into blackness, and the bones pop out in stark, high-contrast white, making the fracture obvious.
And the inverse is the second half of the question. A wide width will have blank shades of gray, resulting in an image with blank contrast.
Yeah.
If the radiologist opens the window with incredibly wide, they are pulling in thousands of data points. They are displaying a massive range of subtle grays, so a wide width will have more shades of gray.
And because you have thousands of shades filling the gap between black and white, the transition is incredibly smooth and gradual. It is a very flat, low-contrast image.
So the complete thought is, a wide width will have more shades of gray, resulting in an image with low contrast. The doctor uses this when they want to look at the lung tissue itself. They widen the window, the harsh bone edges fade away, and a beautiful, sweeping gradient of soft tissue structures is revealed.
And the vital thing to remember is that this is all happening on the exact same exposure.
Oh, right.
The doctor isn't taking multiple x-rays.
Yeah.
Because we captured that massive 14-bit depth, all that hidden data is sitting right there in the computer memory, waiting for the radiologist to slide their mouse and reveal the specific truth they need to see.
It is the painter's art, manipulated in real time. Okay, so we've built the image, the computer has processed it, the doctor has windowed it to perfection. But as scientists, we have to be able to objectively evaluate our work. We can't just say, that looks pretty.
Right, we need metrics.
We are moving into evaluating digital image quality factors. The source material highlights several things we need to measure. We've already covered spatial resolution, which is the sharpness dictated by the matrix.
Yes.
But the review guide asks us about a different kind of resolution. What is low contrast resolution? How does this improve the image quality?
This is an area where digital radiography absolutely annihilates old analog film.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
The text defines low contrast resolution as a type of contrast resolution that deals with the ability to visualize subtle energy differences in soft tissues.
Subtle energy differences, meaning tissues that are physically very similar.
Exactly. We aren't talking about bone versus air. That's a massive energy difference. We are talking about healthy liver tissue versus a slightly denser cancerous tumor growing inside that liver. Both are soft tissues. Both attenuate X-ray radiation almost identically.
On an old physical piece of film, those two tissues would absorb so similarly that they would probably just look like a single uniform gray blob. The film didn't have the chemical sensitivity to distinguish them.
Right. But because digital systems capture thousands of shades of gray, our massive bit depth, and because we can mathematically manipulate those shades with LUTs and windowing, the digital system can detect and display a 1% difference in tissue density.
Wow, 1%.
It can take that microscopic energy difference between the tumor and the liver, map it to two slightly different numerical values, and let the doctor see it.
So it improves image quality by literally making the invisible visible. It allows for the early diagnosis of pathologies that simply would not have shown up on older systems until they were much larger and denser. That is a tangible, life-saving metric.
It is. But high resolution is only useful if the image is clean. Which brings us to the great enemy of image quality, noise.
Noise.
The review guide asks us to identify 3 types of noise from the text.
The sources list them as electronic system noise, ambient noise, and quantum model noise. Let's dissect these because noise is a very generic term. I mean, in audio, noise is static. In visual imaging, what is it?
It's random, useless information that obscures the true anatomical signal. Let's start with the physical hardware. Electronic system noise is the inherent electrical static of the machine itself.
Like the background hiss you hear if you turn a cheap stereo amplifier all the way up, even when no music is playing.
Exactly. Electricity flowing through circuits, the ADC crunching millions of numbers, fluctuations in power, all of that generates tiny random electrical signals that get added to the image data.
Just interference.
Right. Engineers work very hard to shield components, but some electronic noise is inevitable.
What about ambient noise? The text lists it, but how does ambient noise ruin an X-ray? Are people talking too loudly in the room?
Not audio noise, no. In this context, ambient noise refers to background radiation.
Oh.
Our digital detectors are incredibly sensitive, and we live in a radioactive world. There is cosmic radiation from space, radioactive isotopes in the concrete of the building, and scatter radiation bouncing around the room from previous exposures.
Wow, I never thought of that.
If a CR plate sits in a room for a few days without being used, it slowly absorbs this ambient background radiation, which creates a foggy noise over the image.
So you have to erase the plates if they sit too long. That makes sense.
Yes. But the third one is the big one, is the one that technologists actually have control over. Quantum model noise.
Quantum model. I need a deep dive on the physics here, because quantum model sounds like a phrase invented for a sci-fi movie.
It does, but it's the most critical noise factor to understand. Let's break down the words. Quantum refers to the individual packets of energy, the actual X-ray photons. Model means a spotty, grainy, or speckled appearance.
Okay.
Quantum model occurs due to statistical fluctuations in the number of X-ray photons reaching the detector.
Statistical fluctuations.
Yeah.
That sounds very academic. Give me a physical analogy.
Imagine standing on a dry concrete sidewalk, and it starts to rain. If it is an absolute downpour, millions of raindrops hitting the ground, the concrete instantly turns a smooth, uniform, solid, dark gray.
The concrete is completely saturated.
Right, but what if it's barely drizzling? What if only a few hundred raindrops fall? You don't get a uniform dark gray, you get a speckled, spotty pattern. Some patches of concrete get hit by 3 drops, and right next to it, a patch gets hit by 0 drops.
And it looks grainy?
Exactly. That is quantum model. In an X-ray, the X-ray tube needs to fire a massive, overwhelming flood of photons, the downpour, to completely saturate the detector and create a smooth, clean image of the anatomy.
So if you don't use enough.
But if the technologist uses too little radiation, if they underexpose the patient, only a light drizzle of X-ray photons makes it through the body.
The detector gets starved of data. One pixel might get hit by 5 photons, while the pixel right next to it randomly gets hit by 0. The computer tries to build an image out of that starved data, and the result is a grainy, static-filled, mottled mess.
Exactly. Photon starvation causes quantum model, and this ties perfectly into a key term from the text. Signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR.
The SNR. This is a battle between good and evil data.
The signal is the good data, the actual downpour of photons that traveled cleanly through the patient's anatomy to carry diagnostic information.
Right.
The noise is the grainy model, the electrical hiss, and the background scatter. The ultimate goal of every exposure is a very high SNR, an overwhelming amount of true signal that completely grounds out the background noise.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most intimidating acronym in the chapter, DQE.
DQE.
The sources ask, what is DQE? And what is the benefit of a digital image system with a high DQE? If SNR is the ratio of good data to bad data, where does DQE fit in?
DQE stands for detective quantum efficiency. It is essentially a grade. It is a measurement of how physically efficient a specific detector is at its job.
The summary defines it as a measure of the sensitivity and accuracy by which the image receptor converts the incoming data to the output viewing device.
Let's use our rain analogy again.
Okay, the drizzle versus the downpour.
Imagine 2 different buckets trying to catch rain. Bucket A is an old, leaky wooden bucket. If 100 raindrops fall into it, 50 leak out before you can measure them. It has terrible efficiency. It requires a massive downpour just to collect a small puddle of water.
Okay. That is a low DQE system.
Right. And bucket B is a state-of-the-art, perfectly sealed scientific funnel. If 100 drops fall in, it catches all 100. It is highly efficient.
Right. A high DQE system is incredibly sensitive. It converts almost every single X-ray photon that strikes it into useful digital signal without wasting any and without adding much electronic noise of its own.
So it mathematically maximizes the signal-to-noise ratio using less raw material.
Which answers the second part of the question. What is the benefit? Why do hospitals spend millions of dollars to upgrade from a 30% DQE system to a 70% DQE system?
Because if the bucket is highly efficient, you don't need a downpour anymore. You can create a beautiful, high SNR image using a fraction of the raindrops.
And in radiography, those raindrops are ionizing radiation.
Exactly.
So a higher DQE means the technologist can dramatically lower the technical factors on the machine. They can shoot fewer X-rays.
Which directly translates to significantly less radiation dose to the patient while still maintaining perfect diagnostic image quality. High DQE is the holy grail of imaging engineering.
That is a phenomenal transition into the final and arguably most important section of this deep dive. Section 6, safety first. Everything we have discussed so far has been about making the picture look perfect.
Right, the aesthetics.
But medical imaging is fundamentally dealing with dangerous ionizing radiation. We have to ensure we aren't harming the patient in the pursuit of a pretty picture. And this requires us to confront the dark side of that computer processing we praised earlier.
We have to talk about the danger of rescaling.
Right. We established that rescaling is the digital tear button. It automatically shifts the histogram to fix brightness errors.
Right.
If a technologist uses too little radiation, the image has quantum model and it looks terrible. But what if they use too much radiation? What if they blast the patient with 5 times the necessary dose?
Well, in the old analog film days, the consequences were immediate and obvious. If you used 5 times too much radiation, the physical film would turn pitch black. The radiologist couldn't read it, the image had to be repeated, and the technologist knew instantly they had made a severe error. The film policed the technologist.
There was undeniable visual feedback.
But in the digital age, rescaling breaks that visual feedback loop. If a technologist blasts a patient with 5 times too much radiation, the detector captures it, the ADC quantifies it, and the histogram mountain range is shifted way too far to the dark side.
Just like normal.
But then the rescaling algorithm kicks in. It says, whoa, this is too dark. Let me mathematically slide all these numbers back to the perfect baseline. It applies the LUT, and it spits out an image onto the monitor that looks absolutely beautiful.
Wait, so the technologist looks at the screen, sees a gorgeous, perfectly contrasted bone, and thinks, wow, I did a great job. They have zero visual clue that they just massively overradiated a human being.
Exactly. And because using more radiation actually increases the signal-to-noise ratio and eliminates quantum model, technologists subtly learned that using a little extra dose guarantees a pretty, noise-free picture that the computer will magically fix.
Oh, that's bad.
Over time, average radiation doses slowly creep higher and higher across the industry. This phenomenon is a massive safety concern, and it has a name: dose creep.
Dose creep. The invisible escalation of radiation because the computer is hiding the evidence? That is terrifying.
It is a real problem.
So how do we stop it? If the image on the screen lies to us, what is the source of truth?
We have to bypass the image entirely and look at the raw data.
Yep.
That is where our final source concepts come in. Exposure indicators.
Okay, exposure indicators.
The summary text states, exposure indicators reflect the amount of X-ray exposure to an image receptor by looking at the quantity of photons that strike the detector.
So it's a raw meter reading. It measures the physical downpour before the computer starts doing its math magic.
Yes. When that beautiful rescaled image pops up on the technologist's screen, there is a small number displayed in the corner of the software interface. That is the exposure indicator, or EI number.
Okay.
The image might look perfect, but that EI number tells the unvarnished physical truth about how much radiation actually hit the plate.
So the review question asks, how can exposure indicators be used to assess image quality?
The sources give a direct answer. Exposure indicator numbers can be used as a quality control tool for image quality and radiation protection.
Meaning the technologist has to check it.
The technologist is professionally obligated to look at that number on every single exam.
Yeah.
Every body part has a specific, scientifically determined target EI range.
So if the target is 200.
If the technologist shoots a hand and the target EI is 200, but their screen shows an EI of 800, they know they just severely overradiated the patient, regardless of how pretty the picture looks.
They use the EI to police themselves since the film can no longer do it?
Exactly. It forces accountability. But reading raw EI numbers can be confusing because different manufacturers, Siemens, GE, Philips, all use completely different proprietary mathematical scales for their EI numbers.
Really? Why wouldn't they standardize it?
Good question. One might use a logarithmic scale, another might be inversely proportional.
So a technologist moving from room to room has to memorize 3 different complex math systems just to know if they overexposed someone.
They used to. Which is why the industry developed the final term in our key list, the deviation index, or DI.
Oh, good, a standardized system. The source guide asks, what is the DI of an image? Let's break it down. Deviation, how far off course you are. Index, a standardized measurement.
The DI is a universal mathematical value that takes a proprietary EI number and compares it to the perfect target exposure. It essentially translates the confusing math into a simple scorecard.
I love a simple scorecard.
A DI of 0.0 means your exposure was absolutely perfect.
A bullseye.
A positive DI, like plus 1.0 or plus 2.0, means you deviated upward. You overexposed the patient. A negative DI, like minus 1.0, means you deviated downward. You underexposed, and you likely have quantum model.
It simplifies the physics into a straightforward safety check. You just look at the DI. If it's a positive number, you use too much dose. Adjust your technique next time. It is the ultimate fail-safe at the very end of the digital pipeline to combat dose creep.
It ensures that the computer's incredible processing power is used to enhance diagnosis, not to cover up poor technical practice.
Wow. Take a deep breath. If you have been following along with us, tracking these concepts, congratulations. You have just successfully navigated the entire, incredibly complex digital radiography imaging pipeline.
We have covered a massive amount of physical and computational ground today.
We truly did. We started with the physical receptors, understanding how a CR plate traps electrons in a metastable state and requires a laser to release them, while DR circuits convert energy instantly.
Right.
We watched the ADC sample continuous analog waves and quantify them into discrete, rigid numerical steps. We visualized the matrix, realizing that shrinking the pixel size is the physical mechanism that increases our spatial resolution.
The locked FOV.
Exactly. We debated bit depth, proving that while human eyes only see 50 shades of gray, the computer demands 16,000 shades to provide the algorithmic headroom necessary for manipulation without degradation.
And then the processing.
Yes. We mapped the raw data onto a histogram, carefully extracting the useful anatomical signal from the raw beam. We utilized rescaling as our digital tear button to force brightness correction, and we applied customized mathematical lookup tables to stretch or compress the data into perfect clinical contrast.
ELATs.
We dove into the microscopic weeds of local processing, calculating neighborhood averages with a sliding kernel to apply high-pass edge enhancement or low-pass smoothing. We put the controls back into the doctor's hands, explaining how narrowing the window width strips away grays to create stark, high-contrast bone imaging.
We covered a lot of ground.
We celebrated the high DQE systems that maximize the signal-to-noise ratio and lower patient dose. And finally, we anchored the entire monumental process in the reality of radiation safety, utilizing exposure indicators and the deviation index to pierce the veil of rescaling and fight back against dose creep.
It is the absolute foundation of modern diagnostic medicine. Every single day, millions of times a day, this exact mathematical pipeline is executing in fractions of a second to save lives.
It is breathtaking technology. And yet, after an hour of dissecting algorithms, electron traps, matrix calculations, and quantum bottle, I want to bring us full circle.
Back to the beginning.
Back to page 1 of the textbook.
Back to Sonnet 24.
To find where your true image pictured lies. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly philosophical thought to chew on. We have just spent an immense amount of time proving that in digital radiography, the true image of a patient's anatomy doesn't actually exist as a physical object.
It doesn't. There is no physical photograph.
It is entirely 100% a mathematical construct. It is millions of raw, quantified numbers captured by a detector, and those numbers are completely unreadable to the human eye.
Pure data.
They only become an image after they have been algorithmically sorted on a histogram, mathematically rescaled to a fake baseline, modified by a nonlinear lookup table, convolved by a sliding kernel, and artificially windowed on a glowing monitor. Every single pixel you look at on a medical display has been intentionally mathematically altered from its original physical state to, as the textbook so clinically puts it, improve diagnostic quality.
The computer is constantly making invisible decisions about what to enhance, what to smooth over, and what to completely hide in the shadows of a narrow window width.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with. We trust these images implicitly with our health, our diagnoses, and our lives.
We do.
But if every single thing a doctor sees on a digital monitor has been intentionally manipulated by thousands of lines of code to force a very specific, predetermined perspective, at what exact point does the computer's processing stop being a pure scientific reproduction of anatomy and truly start becoming the painter's art?